President Trump has issued an executive action in which he says basically history's gotten out of balance as the American government either funds it through museums or national parks. And he said instead that this federal role in history should instead focus on the greatness of the achievements and the progress of the American people. So President Trump thinks there's an imbalance in the way we talk about history. How do you see that?
I don't see the imbalance. I think we need to celebrate the greatness of the American people. The greatness of the American people comes from telling these complicated stories. And that's a good story is a good story is a good story. That's what you're looking for. You don't want to just say it. Otherwise, it's just sort of slogans that are put up on the wall. We want to feel that we know who Thomas Jefferson is. We need to understand the internal struggles that Abraham Lincoln had. We have to understand what was going through Rosa Parks' mind when she refused to give up her seat on the bus. This in no way takes away from the glory. It just makes the story fuller and richer and permits purchase for everyone. You want a history to be complicated because it gives everybody a chance to own or have access to it. There is my door where I'm going through. There's a wonderful scholar, Maggie Blackhawk, in our film, who says, after our scene on the Declaration of Independence, that it's deeply significant to people at the margins, that these words that do not include them, they do not include women, they do not include the poor, they do not include any enslaved or free African Americans, they do not include Native Americans, but the words themselves are so inspirational that they begin to suggest a much larger and more what we would say kind of American polity, that a bunch of us all together of different varieties doing lots of different things and pursuing happiness, this idea of virtue and lifelong learning.
Along those lines, the stories you tell in this documentary and the people who tell it, there's a real diversity. Was that an important part of your storytelling?
Absolutely. I think that we tend to have the revolution, we think of it as just the guys in Philadelphia, which is really important, thinking great thoughts and writing them down. The bold-faced names, if you will. What we wanted to do is take those bold-faced names and make them not just kind of inaccessible, but real, so you could understand dimension to them. But also realize there's scores of other people that have voices and that are important, and they're 0.01% of people had their portraits painted. That doesn't mean that everybody else didn't exist or everybody else didn't do something, particularly if you gave your life on Bunker's Hill to start this new nation or at Yorktown or at Brandywine or Long Island. Just because you don't have a portrait painted doesn't mean that you're not somebody. So we're trying to give everyone a voice, and so that what you have is a chorus. So it all goes back to music, always goes back to music. That, Lincoln talks about the mystic chords of memory. These are not ropes, these are celestial chords. That the chorus of Americans has an emotional power to it. That the singularity of just making it about a great man theory, that the problem has been in that at times, and may have to do with Trump's initiatives, is that in order to tell a bottom-up story, we've sometimes thrown out a top-down story. There's no need. You can do a top-down and a bottom-up, and that's actually the most vigorous and active and most powerful form of history is when they meet. When, as you are in a tent a few hundred yards from Rochambeau's tent outside Yorktown, you being George Washington, that you also know that that group that's taking Redoubt number 10 has, led by Lafayette, includes Alexander Hamilton, but also has Joseph Plum Martin, who signed up a couple days after the Declaration at age 15 and has just seen unbelievable action and violence and whatever is rushing the abattis, the spiked logs that are going to protect them, along with Rhode Islanders who have been promised their freedom after the war is over, both runaway and enslaved Rhode Island. I mean, this is who takes Redoubt number 10, that permits us, along with Redoubt number 9 that the French take, to roll the big guns in to make Cornwallis painfully aware, if he has not been aware of it up to that point, that his cause is lost and will precipitate the surrender that will come a few days later.
diversity of voice and storytelling was important to you. That also is under assault at the moment. The president basically is trying to remove all efforts to keep diversity in mind. Is there something that is lost in that?
Well, there's a strength in a wagon wheel of all the different spokes into the hub. We're all looking for the hub, whatever the hub is, meaning, something that pulls us together, that chorus. That's what we're all about. And so that the strength of that wheel has to do with having the spokes and having a multitude of perspectives. The impulse for some is to say there's only one perspective. And that's true of many different things. And it isn't just from a top-down sort of a sense, so let's make this simpler. It's also a lot of people mistake. And what we've tried to do is be liberated from any fashion of what's called historiography. Sorry to, on a Sunday morning make the words so big, but it's sort of the fashions of the way we study history sometimes say it's got to be only from this perspective. It's got to be Freudian, or it's got to be Marxist economic, or it's got to be symbolic, or it's got to be, postmodern, or whatever the thing is. You don't need that. All you need to do is say, if a kid was involved, I want to understand what that kid felt. If a great, person that George Washington, I want to know what he did and what he felt. Did he really need to ride out into the battle at Kips Bay and risk his own life? I mean, at one time at Princeton, he does the same thing, and his own aides are covering their eyes, afraid they're going to see their commander-in-chief. If he's shot, it's all over. There's no country. Right? And then watch him make mistakes, and at the same time, see the way he held, like the strongest of glues, the country together as it's going.